On the morning of our anniversary, I spent 5 hours prepping her favorite dishes. When she got home, she didn't even take off her shoes before looking at the setup and laughing. "What is this? Some desperate attempt to prove you're not completely useless," she said. Then she snapped a picture, sent it to someone, and muttered loud enough for me to hear, "Can you believe this guy? He actually thinks this fixes how pathetic he is." She didn't touch the food, just grabbed her phone and locked herself in the bedroom to FaceTime him. I just smiled and cleaned everything up in silence. Today, she regretted everything she said and is now calling me nonstop. So, I've been lurking here for a while, but never thought I'd be posting my own story. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My hands are still shaking as I type this. I, 30M, have been married to Catalina, 29F, for 3 years now. Together for 5. I guess I should have seen the signs earlier, but you know how it is when you're wearing those rose-colored glasses. All the red flags just look like flags. Well, yesterday was our anniversary. 3 whole years of marriage. Lately, things have been different. Catalina's been distant, always on her phone, working late. The usual sus behavior that makes you wonder, but you push it down because, hey, maybe you're just being paranoid, right? I decided to do something special for our anniversary. In the past, I've done the typical flowers and dinner reservations thing, but this year I wanted to go above and beyond. Catalina is always going on about how her mom used to make these traditional dishes from her home country. She hasn't had them in years since her mom passed away, and she's mentioned more than once how much she misses that connection to her heritage. So, like an idiot, foreshadowing, lol. I spent weeks secretly tracking down the recipes. I called her aunt, who lives across the country, spent hours watching YouTube tutorials to get the techniques right, even practiced a couple of times when she was out of town for work. The morning of our anniversary, I got up at like 5 a.m. to start cooking. 5 freaking hours of prep work. Got all the spices exactly right, made everything from scratch, set the table with candles, the whole 9 yards, even folded the napkins into those fancy swan shapes by watching a tutorial online. I was actually pretty proud of myself. The apartment smelled amazing, the table looked like something out of a catalog, and the dishes came out better than I expected. I've always been decent at cooking, but this was next level for me. Figured it would show Catalina that I was paying attention, that I cared enough to recreate something so personal to her. The plan was for her to come home around 6. I had texted her earlier just to confirm, and she replied with a thumbs up emoji. That should have been my first clue something was off, but whatever. 6:30 rolls around. No Catalina. 7. Still nothing. I texted her asking what time she'd be home. Read receipt. No reply. Cool, cool, cool. Finally, at 7:45, I hear keys in the door. The food's still warmish because I'd been reheating bits carefully, but the candles are half melted and my excitement had pretty much faded to anxiety. She walks in, still in her work clothes, scrolling through her phone. Doesn't even look up at first. When she finally does notice the setup, she doesn't take off her shoes or put down her bag. Just stands there and laughs. Like, not a happy laugh. One of those laughs that makes your stomach drop. "What is this? Some desperate attempt to prove you're not completely useless?" she said. I just stood there literally speechless. She whips out her phone, snaps a picture of the table setup, and immediately starts texting someone. Then I hear her mutter loud enough that she clearly wanted me to hear, "Can you believe this guy? He actually thinks this fixes how pathetic he is." She didn't even touch the food, not a single bite, just grabbed her phone charger from her bag and locked herself in our bedroom. Within minutes, I could hear her on FaceTime with someone, laughing. I just stood there like an absolute clown, surrounded by all this food I'd spent hours making. Candles flickering, special playlists still going in the background. Nothing more pathetic than at last playing while you're realizing your marriage is basically over. So what did I do? I smiled and cleaned everything up in silence, packed all the food into containers, washed all the dishes, blew out the candles like none of it ever happened. I slept on the couch that night. Couldn't bring myself to knock on the bedroom door and face whatever was on the other side. In the morning, I got up early, got dressed, and left before Catalina was even awake. Spent the day just walking around thinking about our relationship. When did it change? Was it always like this, and I just didn't notice? How many times had she talked to me like that, and I just brushed it off? The more I thought about it, the more examples came to mind. Little comments here and there. "You're wearing that? I can't believe you think that's a good idea. My friends' partners would never do something so stupid." Always with this laugh like I was some kind of joke. The worst part, I've been making excuses for her behavior for years. She's just stressed from work. She had a tough childhood. She doesn't really mean it. But after yesterday, that was intentional cruelty, and there's no excuse for that. While I was out walking, my phone kept blowing up. First with texts. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You're being childish. I was just joking. Don't be so sensitive." Then with calls. I let them all go to voicemail. each message more desperate than the last. See, the thing is, I didn't leave the house empty-handed this morning. I took the container with all the leftovers from our anniversary dinner and dropped it off at her parents' house with a note explaining exactly what had happened, how their daughter had treated me after I spent hours making her mom's recipes to surprise her on our anniversary. Her family is big on respect and tradition. Really big. And while Catalina might be able to treat me like garbage, she cares very much what her family thinks of her, especially her dad, who apparently called her after I left and read her the riot act. So now she's blowing up my phone, calling me nonstop, texting that she's sorry, that she was just having a bad day, that she didn't mean it, that the him she was talking to was just her work friend Jude, who's been having relationship problems of his own, and she was just venting. Yeah, right, because you definitely FaceTime at 8 p.m. with a work friend on your anniversary while ignoring your husband. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do. Part of me wants to just end it, file the papers, and be done. But 3 years of marriage isn't something you just throw away without at least trying to understand what went wrong. I just checked my phone again, and there are 12 missed calls from her, plus a novel-length text about how sorry she is and how she'll make it up to me. To be honest, I don't even know if there's a way to come back from this. That look of contempt on her face when she saw what I'd done for her. You can't unsee something like that. I'm sitting in a cafe right now typing this all out, trying to figure out my next move. I guess I have to go home eventually, face whatever this has become. Has anyone else been through something like this? Am I overreacting? Underreacting? I don't even know anymore. Update 1. Wow, I really wasn't expecting the response my last post would get. Thanks for all the support and advice, even the brutal stuff. Sometimes you need internet strangers to point out what your friends are too nice to say. So I finally went home that night after sitting in the cafe until they started giving me those "we're closing soon" looks. My phone battery was at 7% from all of Catalina's calls and texts. I turned it off to save the last bit of juice for an emergency and just walked the long way home trying to figure out what I was going to say. When I got to our apartment door, I stood there for like 5 whole minutes, key in hand, wondering if this was the moment our marriage officially ended. Funny how normal things, a door you've walked through 1,000 times, can suddenly feel like this massive symbolic barrier. Well, I finally went in and found Catalina sitting on the couch. Mascara streaked down her face, still in her work clothes from earlier. The moment the door opened, she jumped up and started this whole tearful apology routine. How sorry she was, how she'd had the worst day at work, how she didn't mean any of it, how she'd make it up to me. I just stood there letting her talk herself out. And the weirdest thing happened. The more she talked, the calmer I felt. Like watching someone perform in a play, I suddenly realized I didn't have to be in anymore. When she finally stopped for breath, I asked her one simple question. Who's Jude? You should have seen her face, that micro expression of panic before she recovered and went into damage control mode. Oh, he's just a colleague, just a friend, just someone who's been helping her with a difficult project. Just someone who understands the pressures she's under. I nodded along like I was buying it, then asked why she was FaceTiming him on our anniversary instead of eating dinner with me. More excuses, more justification. Then I mentioned that her cousin had texted me about her hour-long call with this just a friend while I was gone. That's when the tears dried up real quick and defensiveness kicked in. Suddenly, it was all about how I was invading her privacy by talking to her family, how I was trying to turn them against her, how I was overreacting to a stupid joke. Side note, when someone tells you that their cruel behavior was just a joke, that's basically confirmation it wasn't. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, just told her I was going to sleep on the couch again and we could talk tomorrow when we'd both had some rest. She didn't like that answer, but what could she do? The next morning, I got up early and made a plan. First stop, the bank. Opened a separate account and transferred half of our savings in. Not trying to hide money or anything shady, just making sure I had access to funds that couldn't suddenly disappear if things went south. Next, I called my buddy Colby, who went through a nasty divorce last year. Met him for lunch and got some practical advice about protecting myself. He recommended talking to a legal advisor just to know my options, which seemed extreme at first, but then again, so did my wife treating me like I was lower than dirt on our anniversary. After lunch, I swung by our apartment when I knew Catalina would be out, grabbed important documents, birth certificate, passport, insurance info, and a few sentimental items that were just mine. Nothing she'd notice missing right away, but stuff I'd be devastated to lose if she decided to go nuclear. While I was there, I noticed her laptop was open on the coffee table. I'm not proud of this next part, but after what happened, I felt like I needed to know what I was dealing with. Her messages with Jude were right there in her browser. Holy. This wasn't just a work friendship. The messages went back months. Nothing explicitly physical from what I could see, but definitely emotional affair territory. Inside jokes about me, complaints about how basic and boring I was, plans to meet up for drinks after, heart emoji, late night thinking of you texts. And the kicker, a message from the night before our anniversary. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Don't worry about being late, he won't suspect anything. So, the whole time I was cooking and setting up this special dinner, she was planning to blow me off for Jude. The dinner wasn't the surprise. Her actually showing up at all was the surprise. I took screenshots and emailed them to myself, then left everything exactly as I found it. By now my hands were shaking, but not from sadness, pure anger, to be honest. Not the blow-up kind, but the cold, focused kind that makes you see everything super clearly. I spent the next few days in this weird, calm state. Went to work, came home, had surface-level conversations with Catalina, who was walking on eggshells around me. She kept trying to make it up to me with these grand gestures, cooking fancy dinners, ironic, suggesting weekend getaways, even bringing up having kids. Yikes. Meanwhile, she's still texting Jude when she thinks I'm not paying attention. On Friday, I took a personal day while Catalina was at work, packed up enough stuff to last a couple of weeks, and booked an Airbnb. Not the most budget-friendly option, but I needed neutral territory to clear my head. When Catalina got home that evening and saw my packed bags, she absolutely lost it. The tears, the pleading, the promises to change, the blame shifting. She even tried to physically block the door. At one point, I told her calmly that I knew about her and Jude, that I'd seen the messages, that I knew their plans for our anniversary, that I knew this wasn't a one-time thing or a bad day. Her face went through this wild journey. Shock, denial, anger, bargaining. Classic stages of getting caught, lol. She tried to flip it back on me for invading her privacy, then switched to minimizing. It wasn't what it looked like. Then to justifying. I made her feel unappreciated. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Told her I was leaving for a while to think about what I wanted, that she should use the time to figure out what she wanted, because clearly it wasn't me or our marriage. As I was walking out, she said something that stuck with me. You'll be back. You always forgive me. You don't know how to be without me. And in that moment, I realized she was right. I always had forgiven her little cruelties, had made excuses for her behavior, had bent over backward trying to make her happy. Not anymore. The Airbnb is small but clean, has a decent kitchen, which is good because cooking helps me think. Been making simple meals and actually enjoying them without someone criticizing every bite. I've told a few close friends what's happening. Their reactions have been eye-opening. Turns out several of them never liked how Catalina treated me, but didn't know how to say it. My friend Renee actually confessed she'd seen Catalina and some guy, presumably Jude, looking pretty cozy at a restaurant across town a few weeks ago, but didn't want to say anything without proof. Catalina is still blowing up my phone. The messages swing wildly between apologetic and accusatory. Last night, she sent a paragraph about how I was throwing away our marriage over some harmless flirting, followed 10 minutes later by another saying she didn't know what she'd do without me, and she'd do anything to fix this. I haven't blocked her number, but I've muted notifications. Check the messages once a day, usually while having my morning coffee, then put the phone away. Yesterday, she showed up at my work with flowers, causing this super awkward scene in front of my colleagues. I walked her outside and told her not to do that again, that if she couldn't respect basic boundaries, it just confirmed I'd made the right choice by leaving. She looked genuinely shocked, like the idea that her actions have consequences had never occurred to her. This morning was interesting. Got a call from her dad of all people. He was surprisingly supportive of me. Said he and Catalina's mom had raised her better than this and that he was disappointed in her behavior. Asked if there was anything he could do to help. Just having her family not automatically take her side meant more than I expected. So that's where things stand now. I'm talking to a legal advisor next week just to understand my options. Not rushing into anything permanent yet, but also not rolling over. The strangest part, despite everything, there are moments I miss her. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together. That doesn't just disappear overnight, but then I remember the look on her face when she called me pathetic, and I know I deserve better than that. Finally, update. It's been about 3 weeks since my last update, and somehow life keeps getting weirder. First off, thanks again for all the comments and DMs. Knowing I'm not crazy for feeling the way I do has been huge. So, where to begin? I was sitting in this coffee shop near my Airbnb yesterday, just minding my business, scrolling through my email, when I looked up and saw Jude himself at the counter. Didn't even realize I knew what he looked like until that moment, but Catalina has him as her background on her laptop. Oof. So, I recognized him instantly. He hadn't seen me, and I had this split-second decision to make, confront him or just observe. I chose the latter. Watching someone who's been affecting your life so dramatically without them knowing is surreal to Baha. He was just a normal dude, not some movie star heartthrob or whatever my brain had built him up to be. Just a regular guy in khakis, ordering an overpriced latte, checking his phone like it might disappear if he didn't look at it every 10 seconds. After he left, I sat there for like an hour just processing. It's one thing to know about the guy your wife's been having an emotional affair with. Another thing entirely to see him exist in the same physical space as you, completely unaware of the chaos he's helped create in your life. Anyway, back to what's been happening since my last post. After Catalina texted that Jude's girlfriend had found out, things escalated pretty quickly. Apparently, the girlfriend, her name is Connie, found that out later and went nuclear. According to what Catalina eventually told me, Connie screenshot all their conversations and sent them to everyone at their workplace, including their boss. Big yikes. I finally agreed to meet with Catalina after about 10 days of being at the Airbnb. We met at a neutral place, this little park near our old apartment complex. She looked different, not just sad or sorry, but smaller somehow, like she'd deflated a bit. Dark circles under her eyes, hair thrown up in a messy bun instead of her usual perfect styling. The conversation was awkward AF at first. She kept starting sentences and then trailing off. I mostly just listened. Eventually, she got to the point. She and Jude had been emotionally involved, her word, for about 6 months. Nothing physical had happened, supposedly, but she admitted they'd been making plans to figure out what they wanted, aka planning to either cheat physically or leave their respective partners. The whole time she's telling me this, she's fidgeting with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger. I noticed it was on her right hand instead of her left, which felt symbolic in a way I wasn't ready to think about yet. Then she dropped the bomb. After Connie's mass text exposure, their boss called them both in. Turns out workplace relationships are against policy when one person has any kind of authority over the other. Jude apparently has seniority over Catalina in some way. They both got formal warnings, and Jude got transferred to another department. The fallout killed whatever fantasy they'd been building. According to Catalina, Jude immediately backed off and told her they needed to focus on damage control for their careers. Basically threw her under the bus to save himself. Classic. She broke down crying in the middle of the park, saying she'd ruined everything for a relationship that wasn't even real, that she'd been unhappy with herself and projected it onto me, that seeing me do something so thoughtful on our anniversary made her feel even worse about her behavior. So she lashed out. I just sat there watching a bird hop around looking for crumbs while she cried. Felt strangely detached from the whole thing, like watching a movie I'd already seen before. When she finally ran out of tears, I asked the question that had been bothering me most. Had she ever actually loved me, or was I just convenient? She looked genuinely shocked by the question, said of course, she loved me, that's why she married me. But then she admitted something that actually made sense. She'd grown up watching her mom put her dad down constantly, treating him like he was incompetent, and somehow that became her model for how relationships work. Not an excuse, she said, but maybe an explanation. I nodded and said I needed more time, that I couldn't just come home and pretend none of this had happened. She didn't argue, which was new. Over the next week, we texted occasionally. Nothing deep, just checking in. She mentioned she'd booked an appointment with a therapist, which surprised me. Catalina had always been firmly in the therapy is for weak people camp, her dad's influence. Meanwhile, I was doing my own thing. Started hitting the gym again after like a 2-year hiatus. Reconnected with some friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Red flag I should have noticed earlier. How many friendships had faded because Catalina always had some reason we couldn't go out with them. Catalina's cousin Marcia reached out to me on Insta asking if we could meet up. I was hesitant but agreed. Turns out Marcia wanted to apologize for not saying something sooner about Catalina's behavior. She told me the family had always seen how Catalina treated me, but they have this weird don't interfere in marriages rule, so nobody spoke up. She also confirmed Catalina's parents' relationship was exactly as toxic as Catalina had described. That conversation with Marcia helped me understand things a bit better. Not excuse Catalina's behavior, but at least see the bigger picture of how she ended up this way. After about 3 weeks at the Airbnb, my bank account was feeling the strain. I needed to make a decision about next steps. The legal advisor I'd talked to laid out my options, but recommended trying counseling before filing any paperwork if there was even a small chance of reconciliation. I thought about it for days, made actual pros and cons lists like some kind of rom-com character, even flipped a coin at one point. It landed on leave for what it's worth, but I realized I felt disappointed by that outcome, which told me something. Finally, I texted Catalina and asked if she'd be open to couples counseling. Her response was immediate. Yes. She'd already researched some options and could send them over. We had our first session 2 days ago. It was not what I expected. The counselor didn't let us jump right into the affair drama. Instead, she had us talk about our families, our communication patterns, our expectations of marriage, basic foundation stuff that made me realize how little we'd actually discussed before getting married. At one point, the counselor asked us each to describe what we thought marriage was supposed to look like. Our answers were completely different, like fundamentally incompatible in some ways. How had we never talked about this before? Yesterday, I went back to our apartment to pick up more clothes. Catalina was at work, so I expected to be alone. When I walked in, I noticed changes. The place was cleaner than it had been in months. Some of my favorite snacks were in the pantry. She usually only bought stuff she liked. My gaming setup, which she'd always complained took up too much space, had been cleaned and organized instead of shoved in the corner. Small things, but they caught my attention. As I was packing up some more clothes, I noticed a book on her nightstand, How to Break Free from Toxic Family Patterns. It was dog-eared and highlighted throughout. Next to it was a journal with therapy homework written on the cover. I didn't read either, boundaries, but seeing them there made something shift inside me. She was actually trying, not just saying she would change, but doing the work. I'm still at the Airbnb for now. We've agreed to take couples counseling seriously for 2 months, then reassess. No guarantees from either side. This morning, she texted me a picture of a plant she'd bought. One I'd wanted for our living room that she'd always vetoed because it didn't match her aesthetic. Small gesture, but it hit different. I don't know if we'll make it. There are days I'm still angry enough to want to walk away and never look back. Other days, I see glimpses of the woman I fell in love with trying to fight her way back from whatever dark place she went to. What I do know is that I'm not the same person who stood in that kitchen watching his wife mock his anniversary dinner. That guy might have forgiven immediately, might have blamed himself, might have tried even harder to please someone who couldn't be pleased. The new me has boundaries, has self-respect, isn't afraid to walk away if that's what's needed, but also isn't afraid to stay and fight for something that might. A super thanks helps me keep bringing you the best daily content. Your support means I can keep doing what I love. Thanks for being awesome.